This is who you've been sneaking off to see? A grease-stained mechanic who can't even afford a decent tie? A grease-stained mechanic.
Emeric Kade stood beside the folding table of raffle prizes, a paper cup of lemonade in one hand and his son's science fair ribbon in the other. His jacket was clean but worn at the cuffs. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He didn't know the man shouting at him owed his entire company to a patent Emeric filed 9 years ago under a name nobody remembered. He didn't know that patent's license was up for renewal in 31 days. He didn't know the quiet blind trust reviewing that renewal was controlled by the very hand now setting down a paper cup instead of throwing a punch. Emeric set the cup on the table, pulled out his phone, and typed 4 words to his attorney. "Hold the renewal, please." Then he slid the phone back into his pocket and said nothing. In the next 60 seconds, you're going to meet the daughter who already knew, and by the end of this video, you'll watch a billionaire lose everything he built on another man's invention. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who judged your shoes instead of your worth, type "still waters" in the comments and let's begin. Riverdale wasn't the kind of town that made headlines. It had one good diner, a hardware store older than most of its customers, and a community center with a gym floor that squeaked no matter how many times the maintenance crew waxed it. It was the kind of place where everybody waved at everybody, and nobody asked what you did for a living, because they already thought they knew. Emeric Kade had lived there for 6 years. He ran a small repair shop 2 blocks off Main Street, the kind with a bell over the door and a coffee pot that was always half full. To the people of Riverdale, he was just Emeric, quiet, steady, good with an engine, better with his son. His son, Theo, was 8 years old and missing his front tooth. Emeric raised him alone ever since Theo's mother, Naomi, passed away from a sudden illness when Theo was barely 2. Emeric didn't talk about it much. He didn't need to. Anyone who watched him crouch down to tie Theo's shoes before school or sit through every single one of Theo's Little League games in the rain understood exactly what kind of father he was. What almost nobody in Riverdale knew, because Emeric had built his life specifically so they wouldn't, was that the man fixing carburetors on Elm Street held the master patent behind the energy cell technology used in nearly every consumer device sold by Voss Dynamics, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country. 9 years earlier, working out of a converted garage with Naomi as his only business partner and best friend, Emeric had designed a battery architecture that solved a problem engineers twice his size and funding had been chasing for a decade. He filed the patent under a blind trust called Ash Grove Holdings, with a lawyer as the only point of contact, because he never wanted the invention to become bigger than his family. When Voss Dynamics came knocking with a licensing offer worth more money than Emeric knew what to do with, he said yes to the deal and no to the spotlight. He took the royalties. He let his lawyer, a sharp and quietly loyal woman named Priya Okafor, handle every renewal, every negotiation, every phone call. Nobody at Voss Dynamics had ever met the inventor behind Ash Grove Holdings. They only knew the name on the contract and the enormous checks they wrote every quarter. That was exactly how Emeric wanted it. Until the day his son's science teacher introduced him to a new parent volunteer at the fall fundraiser. A woman named Wren Pemberton. Wren was warm in a way that surprised him. She wasn't performing kindness the way some people in expensive coats did when they visited a modest town. She was just kind, plainly and without effort. She knelt down to ask Theo about his volcano project before she said a single word to Emeric. She remembered the names of kids she'd only met once. She laughed easily, and when she laughed, she covered her mouth like she was embarrassed to take up space. It took Emeric 3 conversations to learn her last name was Pemberton, and 1 more to realize whose daughter she was. Randall Voss Pemberton was the founder and CEO of Voss Dynamics. His face had been on the cover of business magazines more times than Emeric could count. He was the kind of man who measured people the way he measured stock performance, quickly, coldly, and almost always by appearance. Wren had grown up inside that world of private jets and quarterly earnings calls, but she'd spent her adult life trying to walk out of its shadow. She taught art 2 days a week at the community center. She drove a car that was 8 years old. She'd told her father more than once that she didn't want his name opening doors for her. She wanted to open them herself. Emeric and Wren's friendship grew slowly, the way real things tend to. Coffee after fundraiser meetings. A shared laugh over Theo's insistence that his volcano needed more lava, Dad, more. A quiet dinner when Wren mentioned, almost sheepishly, that she hadn't told her father she was seeing anyone. "He'll want to know everything," she said one evening, sitting on the tailgate of Emeric's truck outside the shop, watching the sun drop behind the water tower. "Where you went to school, what you're worth, whether you'll embarrass him at the country club." "I didn't go to a school he'd recognize," Emeric said honestly, "and I don't think I've ever set foot in a country club." "He judges people by their bank statements," Red admitted. "I used to think that was normal. It's not." Emeric didn't correct her. He didn't tell her what his real bank statement looked like, or whose name was quietly funding half the technology her father's empire depended on. It never felt relevant. He wasn't dating Wren because of what he had. He was falling for her because of who she was when nobody was performing for anyone. The way she knelt to talk to an 8-year-old about volcanoes, the way she remembered people's names, the way she never once asked him what he drove or where he'd gone to school. For 3 months they kept it quiet, not out of shame, but because Wren wanted to build something real before her father's opinions could get anywhere near it. She'd watched Randall dismantle 2 of her previous relationships with nothing but a raised eyebrow and a well-timed comment about potential and ambition. She should have known 3 months wasn't long enough.
The fall fundraiser at the Riverdale Community Center was supposed to be a small, ordinary evening. A silent auction, a raffle table, a gymnasium decorated with string lights and paper lanterns made by the 3rd grade art class. Theo had spent 2 weeks building a baking soda volcano for the science fair display in the lobby, and he'd insisted, with the particular seriousness only an 8-year-old can summon, that his father wear his good jacket. Emeric wore the jacket. It was clean, pressed, and 6 years old, with cuffs that had softened from wear rather than neglect. Wren arrived late, apologizing with a laugh, her hair still damp from the rain outside. She found Emeric near the raffle table, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade, and when she reached for one, their fingers brushed, and neither of them pulled away. That was the moment Randall Pemberton walked in. He hadn't been expected. Wren had specifically not told him about the event, but a business associate's daughter attended the same school, and Randall had decided, on a whim, to make an appearance, the kind of appearance that photographed well and cost him nothing but 45 minutes of his evening. He saw his daughter first. Then he saw her hand near a stranger's. Then he saw the jacket with the worn cuffs, and something in his expression closed like a door. "Wren!" His voice cut through the low hum of the gymnasium before he'd even fully crossed the room. Parents nearby turned. A volunteer near the auction table went still. Wren's smile faltered. "Dad, I didn't know you were—" "Clearly." Randall's eyes moved over Emeric the way a customs officer inspects a suspicious bag, top to bottom, cataloging every flaw. The jacket, the work boots scuffed at the toe from an afternoon under a truck, the paper cup of lemonade instead of the imported water Randall's assistant always kept on hand for him. "Who is this?" Randall said. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation dressed as one. "This is Emeric," Wren said, steadying her voice, stepping slightly in front of him without meaning to. "Emeric Kade. Dad, please—" "Kade," Randall repeated the name like it tasted wrong. "And what exactly do you do, Mr. Kade?" "I run a repair shop on Elm Street," Emeric said simply. No defense, no dressing it up. Randall let out a short, humorless laugh, the kind meant to be heard by everyone within 20 feet. "A repair shop." He turned to his daughter. "This is who you've been sneaking off to see? A grease-stained mechanic who can't even afford a decent tie?" The gymnasium quieted in that particular way rooms do when something painful is happening in public and everyone is deciding whether to look away. A few parents near the punch bowl exchanged uncomfortable glances. Theo, standing near his volcano display 20 feet away, looked over, confusion crossing his small face. "Dad, stop it," Wren said, her cheeks flushing with anger rather than embarrassment. "You don't know anything about him." "I know enough," Randall said, straightening his cufflinks as though the conversation itself had wrinkled him. "I know a man who dresses like that in a town like this isn't someone who's going to keep up with the life you were raised in. I didn't build what I built so you could throw it away on someone who fixes bumpers for a living." Emeric set his paper cup down on the table, slow and deliberate. He didn't argue, he didn't raise his voice. He crouched slightly, caught Theo's eye across the room, and gave him a small, reassuring nod. "It's fine, buddy," before looking back at Randall with an expression that was, infuriatingly to Randall, completely calm.
"I think it's time you go home, Wren," Randall said, already turning as if the matter were settled, as if Emeric were a stain that had simply been noted and dismissed. Wren didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere." Randall paused, glancing back, clearly unused to being ignored. "Excuse me?" "You embarrassed yourself tonight, not me," Wren said, quiet but unshaking. "And not him." Randall's jaw tightened. He looked at Emeric one final time, top to bottom, the way a man dismisses an expense he considers beneath discussion. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Kade," he said, in a tone that meant the opposite. Then he turned and walked out of the gymnasium, his shoes clicking hard against the waxed floor, leaving a wake of silence behind him. Wren pressed her palms to her eyes for a moment, humiliation and fury warring on her face. "I am so sorry to you," she said to Emeric. "He's never... I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to apologize for him," Emeric said gently. He reached down and picked his lemonade back up, took a slow sip, and looked entirely unbothered, not performing calm, but genuinely holding it. What Wren didn't understand yet, and what Randall Pemberton had no way of knowing, was that Emeric wasn't holding back anger. He simply didn't feel the need to defend a life he wasn't ashamed of. He pulled out his phone instead, thumb moving quickly across the screen. He typed a short message to Priya Okafor, the attorney who had handled every detail of Ash Grove Holdings for 9 years without ever revealing his name to a single person at Voss Dynamics. "Hold the renewal on the Voss Dynamics license, please. Don't process anything until you hear from me directly." He hit send, slid the phone back into his pocket, and turned his attention back to Theo's volcano, kneeling down to ask him whether the lava needed more red food coloring.
"Ash Grove is holding the renewal," the counsel said. "No explanation given. If this isn't resolved in 3 weeks, we lose licensing rights to the core architecture in every current device line. There's no alternative technology ready to deploy at scale. Our competitors would eat us alive within 2 quarters. Randall waved a hand, unbothered, the way he waved away most inconveniences. "It's Ash Grove. They've renewed for 9 straight years without blinking. Call them again. Offer a rate increase if that's what this is." "It's not about money," the counsel said carefully. "The trust's instructions were explicit. No renewal until further notice from the principal directly." "Then find out who the principal is," Randall snapped. 9 years and we've never even met this person. That ends now." It took his legal team 4 more days to arrange what Priya Okafor was, in truth, more than willing to arrange from the very beginning. A meeting, in person, at a neutral location Emeric himself selected. Not a boardroom, not a restaurant, but the Riverdale Community Center, the same gymnasium where Randall had humiliated him 2 weeks earlier, now set up for its usual Thursday evening town meeting. Randall arrived expecting to meet a lawyer, an inventor he'd pictured as some reclusive engineer in a distant city, perhaps a retired scientist protecting his legacy. He did not expect to walk through the same doors he'd stormed out of 2 weeks prior and find Emeric Kade standing near the same raffle table, Priya Okafor beside him with a folder of documents, and Wren standing a few feet away, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Randall stopped mid-stride. "What is this?" "This is Ash Grove Holdings," Priya said calmly, stepping forward. "Mr. Pemberton, I'd like to formally introduce you to the principal and founder of the trust and the sole inventor of record on the energy cell architecture patent your company has licensed for the past 9 years." She gestured to Emeric. The color drained slowly from Randall's face as the pieces assembled themselves in real time. The town, the gymnasium, the man he'd mocked for his cuffs and his boots and his lemonade. That's impossible. Ash Grove is a firm, a corporation." "Ash Grove is a blind trust," Priya corrected, "established 9 years ago by Mr. Kade so that Voss Dynamics would evaluate the technology on its merits, not on assumptions about the man behind it. Assumptions like the ones you made in this exact room 2 weeks ago." A few other parents and town residents, present for the regular Thursday meeting, had gone quiet, sensing something bigger unfolding than the usual agenda about the community garden budget. Randall's mouth opened and closed. You own the patent? You're the reason my entire—" He stopped, recalculating everything at once, the humiliation of the fundraiser colliding with the sudden understanding that the grease-stained mechanic he'd dismissed held the technological foundation of his empire in the palm of his hand. "I run a repair shop," Emeric said evenly, echoing his own words from 2 weeks ago, "and I also hold the patent your company has depended on since before your stock ever recovered from its worst quarter in company history. Both of those things are true. You only saw the one you'd already decided mattered." "Why?" Randall said, his voice quieter now, stripped of his usual command. "Why would you hide something like this?" "Because I didn't want my son growing up with a father defined by a number on a contract, and because I've watched what happens to people who let money decide who deserves respect. I didn't want to become one of them." Randall glanced at Wren, who held his gaze without flinching, and then at Priya, whose folder of documents made it clear this wasn't a bluff. "The renewal," Randall said finally, some of the fight draining out of him. "What do you want?" "I want you to sign it," Emeric said, "under the same terms as every year before this one."
I'm not interested in punishing your company or the thousands of people who work there because of your mistake." Relief flickered across Randall's face, quickly followed by confusion. "Then why hold it all? Why any of this?" "Because I wanted you to understand something you couldn't learn any other way," Emeric said. "The man you humiliated in front of a room full of people 2 weeks ago is the same man holding the future of your company in his hands right now. Nothing about me changed between then and now, only what you knew changed. That should tell you something about how you decide who deserves your respect." The gymnasium was utterly silent. Randall stood there, a man who had built an empire on judging outcomes and numbers, confronted with the plain fact that his worst misjudgment hadn't been a business decision at all. It had been a person. He signed the renewal 3 days later, quietly, without ceremony, in Priya Okafor's office. There was no press release, no public apology demanded. Emeric had never wanted one. But word travels in small towns and in boardrooms too. Within weeks, the story of the mechanic who held Voss Dynamics' most critical patent had made its way through industry circles, not as a scandal, but as a quiet, well-earned legend, the inventor who never needed anyone to know his worth until someone tried to tell him he didn't have any. Randall Pemberton attended the next community fundraiser at Riverdale alone,
standing near the back of the gymnasium, watching from a distance as his daughter laughed beside a man in a worn jacket, as Theo proudly presented a new science project to a small crowd of neighbors, as the string lights flickered against a paper lantern ceiling in a town that had never once needed to know who Emeric Kade really was to know exactly what he was worth. Randall didn't approach them that night. He simply watched, the way a man watches something he understands too late, not with anger anymore, but with the quiet, permanent weight of having been wrong in front of everyone who mattered. Emeric never brought it up again. He didn't need to. He'd already said everything that needed saying. In a paper cup of lemonade, a text message held for 3 seconds too long, and a calm he never once had to fake. If this story reminded you that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the one holding everything up, hit like, subscribe for more stories like this one, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from.